Welcome to the inner world of filmmaking. I'm your host, Tammy McGarrow. I'm an editor, podcaster, and still photographer. In this show, I will interview filmmakers in all facets of production and distribution. I'm so excited to have Michelan Sisti on today to talk about puppeteering in film, television, and theater. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tammy. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Why don't we start with, you started in New York as a theater actor on and off Broadway. What drove you to becoming an actor?
Well, that's because I was a ham when I was a kid. I was like so many kids. I was a cut-up, a class clown. I was an army brat, and because we moved every 2 years, you had to find ways to fit in as quickly as possible. And one of the best ways for me was to be a funny guy, to make the jokes and do all of the silly stuff. And I liked that. I liked the response that it got. And that kind of planted the seed. Then when I was in 5th grade, out of the blue, something that I had never experienced because I always went to school on Army bases and they didn't have all of the programs that some of the other places might. But they had a talent show in my elementary school in 5th grade. And I entered the show and I decided I was going to sing because I had always loved to sing. And I sang Get Me to the Church on Time from My Fair Lady. And it was the song that the drunken father who didn't always meet the mark sang. And of course, I was up there as a little 5th grader with an empty liquor bottle in my hand trying to be drunk while I was singing. That got such a reaction that I thought, oh, this is even more fun. So that seed grew. And when my dad retired from the Army, we were stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina at the time. And whenever we couldn't be someplace that he was stationed, we would go back to hometown, which was Buffalo. So we went back to Buffalo, and I was just about to enter junior high school. They had junior high schools back then.
Right.
And I got hooked up with some kids in the neighborhood, and one of them said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to go audition for this musical that's going to happen that a bunch of kids are putting on." So I auditioned for that, and that was the first official musical show that I participated in. It was South Pacific. I played Lieutenant Cable. It was performed in the basement of a Presbyterian church. And that was, from that point on, I said, okay, this is something that I need to put in the back pocket because this is something that I enjoy a lot. So the chronology continues. That led me to, in high school, do a lot of the shows, do the class shows. We had a school show, which was a musical every year. And that got me connected with more of these kids that like to put on shows, so that I did everything that I could before I graduated high school. And when I started going to college in Buffalo as well, the University of Buffalo, I took some acting and theater classes, which piqued me even more, did some more shows. I was doing a production of Charlie Brown for a friend of mine from school, from UB, and I was performing Snoopy. And a fellow and his assistant showed up by the name of Jerry Miller, and he was the director and a creative director of a theater company that was just about to go under residence in the local professional theater, Studio Arena Theater. He liked what I did in the show and asked me to join the company. And that is how I became a professional actor. From that point on,
Wow.
I had my equity card and I was on my way.
Oh my God. That is so amazing. And did you think that sticking with theater, what transitioned you into acting in television and film and moving to LA?
I worked with the Now Theater Repertory. That was the name of the company for a little over just about 3 years. We were in residency at the professional theater there, Studio Arena Theater, for a couple of years, and then we went into residency in another theater in Lockport. And when I finished a year with them there, as far as I was concerned, I had done everything that I could do in Western New York. And if I wanted to pursue this further, which by that time I had decided that that's where I was going to go. I wasn't going to continue to pursue law, which I was a pre-law student in school, or music, which had put me through school. I was going to be an actor. So I said, it's time to move to New York. And in 1971, really, I moved down from Buffalo to New York City and began that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, how amazing to be an on and off Broadway performer.
I was very lucky.
Yeah. What was your favorite play that you did?
Well, I have a very fond spot for all of them for different reasons, of course, but the one that I have to hold highest for me personally was my Broadway debut in Fiddler. I played Mortal the Tailor.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful play. Yeah.
It was wonderful. It was the first major revival of Fiddler to hit Broadway since the original. And it was starring Hershel Bernardi, and he was just absolutely marvelous. We had a great time, and I did that for 2 years. I didn't have to shave for 2 whole years. It was great.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah.
So what made you want to become an actor then? I mean, like a screen actor versus a theater actor.
That was totally kismet. By the time that all came about, I had done 5 Broadway shows by that time. I had established myself to a degree in the city. I had something of a reputation as an actor, and I didn't have to audition for everything. There were still auditions and such. I had agents and all that sort of stuff. But my agent at the time called me up and said, what do you know about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? And of course we laughed because we had never heard of them.
Right.
And he said, well, go on and they want to see you. But in the course of my theater work, I had an occasion to been in a suit. I did the gorilla suit number with Joel Grey in Cabaret. I had a short stint in the crocodile suit when I was doing Peter Pan. So the casting director knew of me and knew that I had that as something of a specialty, suit work. And because this show turned out to be a suit work show, that's why I got the audition. I went in to audition initially for Lynn Kressel, the casting director. She liked me and said, go down the hallway, and the director of this film, Steve Barron, is in that office, and you can read for him. I did that. He said, he handed me another side. You know what a side is, of course?
Yes.
Yeah. He handed me another side. It was a Raphael side, the one we had and the one he handed me. And he said, come back tomorrow with your version of martial arts choreography, ninja fighting choreography to this scene. So I went home to my little tiny apartment at the time. Most of them were. And I rehearsed and came up with, I thought would look kind of cool. Went in the next day. He was in another office, which turned out to be even smaller than my tiny apartment. So that when I finished my audition piece with what I thought of the time as a roundhouse kick, and I hit the wall with my foot and punched my foot through the wall. So I thought, well, you've blown this audition. And then he said something, and I could never remember the exact words, but I always paraphrase. He said, anybody who would do something like that deserves to be one of my turtles. And that's how I became a film actor.
Yeah, but you became Michelangelo. So
yes.
what was the transition for characters? Yeah, like why did
why I wasn't Raphael?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I was the shortest of the guys that he eventually cast, of the 4 of us, and he wanted Mikey to be the shortest one of the bunch because evidently that's how Peter and Kevin had drawn them. So that was one reason. And the other one was that it came, I think in Steve's mind, it came down to perhaps between me and Leif Tilden, who ended up doing Donatello, because we had somewhat similar personalities. I was a little more rambunctious perhaps than he, comedy-wise, and I think that's why he gravitated for me towards Michelangelo.
Yeah, I think that was one of the more popular characters too. I mean, I know I remembered Michelangelo.
Thank you. He happens to be a favorite of mine.
Yes. So how was it wearing that heavy suit and then having to move like they did? Did you have to do like stunt training?
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't do stunt training. What they did was they arranged for the three of us who were in New York, it was Josh Pies, Lee Tilden, and myself based in New York. And then Dave Foreman, who was an actual stunt actor at the time, was coming over from UK, from Britain. But they arranged for us to study with a sensei in New York City.
Wow.
And we had training in basic martial arts and also in our specialty weapons. So I had trainings with nunchucks as well.
Wow. Now, was this filmed in New York?
No, we shot
No.
both the first one and the second one. They were nice enough to ask me back in Wilmington, North Carolina. It had been the old Dino De Laurentiis studio, became the State Carol Co. studio when we were there, and then now it's something else.
Oh, interesting. So then what was the transition to move to LA?
Oh, well, that happened all because of Turtles. I'm in the
Yeah.
first Turtles movie, and I get the wonderful joy of meeting Jim Henson. And at the time, he mentioned that he had this project that he was developing with Disney and ABC at the time, and he'd like me to participate in it in some way, and that was pretty much the extent of the conversation at that point. And then, unfortunately, we lost him. He died, and I figured that was going to be a non-issue from that point on because he was gone. But when we were doing the second Turtles movie, his son, Brian, who had taken over the reins of the company, and Martin Baker, who was another major executive of the company, came to me and said, we're going to go ahead with Jim's television project, and we would like you to be a part of it. So I knew then at that point that once we finished the second Turtles movie, eventually and quite quickly, as it turned out, we'd be going on to that project. And that's how I came out to LA. They had me come out, and we had an orientation training of a couple of weeks, and then we shot the first six episodes of the Dinosaurs show, which is what it turned out to be, Dinosaurs. And then I went back to New York because they were going to air those 6 episodes and see what the reaction was, whether we were going to be picked up or not. And fortunately, we were. And I went back.
Oh, that's great. So why don't we define what is a puppeteer?
Sure. Well, good luck. Because we've had that's been a major issue for the puppeteering community for decades now, as far as contracts and such go. We tried to come up with language at one time when we had a puppeteers committee that was submitting things like that to the union. We tried to come up with language to define what puppeteering was, because it was causing all sorts of problems, and it was very nebulous in the contract. We had at one time described it as manipulating an object, these I'm paraphrasing again, with the idea of creating life, making it come to life in one form or another. We tried to make it as general as possible because of the wrangling that took place with different performances. Some, they would say, that's not puppeteering, and other people would say, that is puppeteering. So anyway, that was basically what we tried to come up with, but it wasn't accepted anyway. So that's never been officially formulated. We don't have official language that definitively says what puppeteering is as far as the profession is concerned. But basically, anything that you manipulate and try to breathe life into, I consider that puppeteering.
So I just was wanting some clarity on this. It's like, what is the difference between, somebody who's puppeteering and an actor wearing a costume? And, like, what's the difference? Is that a puppeteer too? Like Ninja Turtles, is that
Yes.
puppeteering?
Yes, it absolutely is. You're doing both categories of performance, but really there's not that much difference between puppeteering and acting anyway, because as a puppeteer, even though you might have your hand up a puppet or you're inside of a suit like I was with the Turtles and such, you're still puppeteering that creation to make it come to life for the viewer. If you just stand there and do nothing in that suit's not going to perform anything. It's not going to be interesting. It's not going to be alive. So you are puppeteering every time you act in that suit.
Okay. So like Star Trek, you were in Star Trek. Um, I'm curious, like some of those were just, face, the costume is put
Appliances.
on their face. Yeah,
Yeah,
appliance makeup. Is
yeah.
that considered puppeteering because you're creating
No,
this
no, but
entity, or no, it's a
officially, no,
physical?
officially that's considered just an acting gig with prosthetic
Okay.
makeup. If you're inside, and I guess maybe totally encased is one of the defining marks.
Okay.
But yeah, with a makeup like that, it's just, at least by the business, it's just considered a regular acting job.
Okay, like Jim Carrey in The Grinch.
Right.
Like,
That
how
would
would you
be a
define that?
regular
That would
acting job with makeup.
just makeup. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So does one have to have training or should have training to be a puppeteer?
It depends on what you're going to be doing as a puppeteer. You can do many things. You can puppeteer many things and have a very successful performance with no training whatsoever, just intuitive acting ability. But if you're going to do more specialized things like hand puppetry, marionetting, things that require technique that needs to be developed, then yeah, you would be well served by having some training. I was lucky enough to learn on the job. I was on Dinosaurs doing my suit characters, Charlene the daughter and Sid Turtlepus, who got to be other different characters in that suit. And when I wasn't in the suit in a scene, either one of those suits, oftentimes they would tell me, here's this puppet, or go grab that puppet and get into the scene. And then that eventually developed to, here's a couple of lines in the scene with a puppet, and then more and more. And eventually I was just one of the other guys who would put their hand up a puppet and start waggling it around.
Now, you were in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Were you one of the characters at the end in the
Yeah,
vampire
yeah.
production?
I was one of
Which one
the
were you?
I was one of the village women. There, if you look at the frame, well, that's from the back. If you look at the
Yeah.
frame in on the screen, on the left hand side of the picture, there were on the ramparts of the castle, there were three village women who had a little specialty in the middle of the number. Yeah, that's what I did. That
Now,
was fun.
did you give them any training on how to do it?
Oh no, when the producers had made the arrangements with the shop to do with Hensons to do that part of the show, they discussed all of the things that they needed to have happen with the puppets, so that then we were instructed what to do. The director then gave us directions on the day.
So, what kind of training does go into puppeteering? I mean, what things does somebody need to know?
Well, if you're going to do hand puppetry, there's any technique of puppetry. Like I say, training comes in handy. With hand puppetry, you put one of the things we do when we start doing that is there's a little rig with an elastic band and two little eyeballs, and you'll just slide that onto your hand so that you have two little eyes right here, and that teaches you how to find your points of reference, so that if you're going to focus on somebody over here, you know how to turn your hand to get those eyeballs that to the camera. It looks like you're looking at that person. Sometimes you may actually look in to the side of that person, but to camera it looks correct that you're looking at that object or that person. So that's one of the things you would begin training with puppeteering. And then of course you learn your lip sync and how to develop your coordination with your fingers. If the puppet is more involved, sometimes you're inside a hand puppet, and it's not just doing the flaps like that. You might have little pieces that maybe you have an eyebrow, or that has ears or something that you might be able to manipulate with your fingers while you're doing the lip sync as well. So you have a lot of things that you can do with your hand, which, by the way, translates very readily, well, mostly readily, to the electronic and digital puppeteering rigs that Henson's created for the other work that we did.
Do you still work for them?
I work not for them per se now, because years ago they sold everything Muppets to Disney. So I still work with the Muppets, so I work with them. But no, I haven't The pandemic is what basically stopped my working with the Henson Company.
So, how do you prepare for your role in a suit where you have to act and kick and jump? What mentally do you do to prepare for that?
You suffer a lot. Yeah, suit work is tough. If you're in any kind of a completely encasing suit, it's tough. It's not a pleasant environment to be in. It can be very hot, very uncomfortable. Sometimes it can be painful. Oftentimes you don't have enough air to breathe. But you need to be physically strong. So, okay, if you're going to do a major suit job like a Turtles or a Dinosaurs, you would train physically so that you're as fit as you can possibly be and build your endurance, because that's another major factor with doing suit work. You're in there many hours, sometimes more hours than you physically can stand, so you have to push past that point. So you need to be physically fit, so you would train that way. And then you would specifically train for the requirements, the brief on that character. For example, if you're doing a Ninja Turtle, you're obviously going to be doing some martial arts work, so you're going to train to learn some of that stuff or whatever you need to know for the choreography of the show.
Right. And I would think that it's another weight to have to do those movements versus Matrix, where it's just you.
Yeah.
Maybe some strings, but in having to wear a full costume, you have the weight of the costume plus you have to be able to move and maneuver the moves within the costume.
Right. Yeah, that's why it's so hard. But with the Turtles, for example, those suits, once we perspired for a little while in there, they were 70 pounds. So that's an additional 70 pounds of weight that you're talking about having to manipulate and maneuver around.
So what was one of your roles that was the most challenging physically for you?
Well, the Turtles for sure. The Dinosaurs could be, because those were even bigger and heavier suits than the Ninja Turtle suits. Yeah, anything in either of those performances, that was the most difficult physically and demanding that I ever had to do.
And what costume took the longest time to have to get into and out of?
Are
we going back to the Turtles again?
Yeah, I mean, initially it would definitely the Turtles, but they got really good. Hensons, the creature shop, they got really good with that, and they had, and our dressers, who were lifesavers, they were absolute angels. For example, my dresser and I on Dinosaurs, a process that took maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes to get to complete from the time you started to get yourself into the suit and everything that had to go on it. After time and practice and doing it a lot, we got that down to 10 minutes. So instead of having to be like in Turtles 1, we had to be in the suit a lot of the time because it took longer to get in at that point in the early days, and they didn't want to wait. Production, of course, didn't want to wait on set for that to happen. So we would have to be put in our suit in the morning and stay in your suit without the head if you weren't shooting for the rest of the day, which can be very uncomfortable. They try to make it better. But like I say, you get the routine down to the point where a 30-minute process eventually becomes a 10-minute process, and you don't have to sit in your suit all day long. You can just put on those pieces much quicker, and production is okay with that as long as it's quicker.
Yeah, I would think that over a course of time, too, you would find faster ways to do things,
Exactly.
Organically. It sounded like when we were talking about the definition of a puppeteer and kind of maybe a SAG actor, I was curious, like, does one get more money with the added, that you can do puppets too, you know what I mean? Like pay grade up or not, and it's all the same. You're an actor as an actor as an actor.
Would that were the case, but no. As a rule, under a SAG after contract, a puppeteer is considered the same as an actor in performance. There's very little difference in the structure of the contract, and I believe, for the most part, there's very little difference in the pay scale. However, that's just for the basic contract. and a basic acting contract is pretty much the same in either case. When you get into more specialized and more rarefied air as an actor, i.e., more lines, a bigger role, that kind of thing, that's negotiable. Therefore, an actor who I'm working with as a puppeteer, I'm working next to, that actor might be making 3 times what I'm making or more, depending on who they are and what they're doing. But that's neither here nor there, and I accept that because of what they're doing in the show, contractually speaking, as it's defined contractually, compared to what I'm doing in the show. But as a rule, on the basic level, it's the same or similar pay.
Okay, so there's kind of no perks for all the talents one can have, like singing, language, puppeteering, and all that.
I won't say there are no perks because you get to do more and wonderful and varied things if you have a bigger toolkit. So there are perks to having a bigger toolkit. It doesn't necessarily reflect itself in money.
Okay.
But it can be
roles.
in reputation and recognition. It can be in what you're offered to do.
Okay, so then the pay grade for an actor is just the same, whether you're doing puppeteering or not. It's just the level of acting and the role and the budget and all the negotiations that go into it. So there's
Yes.
no difference. Okay,
Not
got
as
it.
a rule, no. There is no downgrade in the contract for being a puppeteer as opposed to an actor.
Okay, well that's good. I mean, because I would think that's more hard work.
Now, this is not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they haven't tried along the road. They keep trying to say, "Oh no, you should be getting this pay, which is less, because you're only doing this as opposed to these people." So yeah, they do continue to try to have a tiered structure like that, which sometimes they do succeed.
But then the tier structure, it sounds like for a puppeteer, gets lowered. So maybe you don't want that. You want to keep it at the actor's rate because you are
Sometimes you
performing.
don't have a choice.
Yeah, that's true.
I've done shows where the puppeteering involved in the show was a specific specialty item, and therefore, over the years, one of the things that often is attempted on this side of production is to offer a puppeteer a stunt contract. This has been a big bugaboo all along because sometimes it gets a bit gray, the line between those two things. But for years, we fought that as puppeteers because the stunt contract was not as good as the basic actor's contract at that time. That I hopefully think has changed. So we would, when they would say, "Oh, here's your contract," and we'd see, "Oh, this is not the correct contract. We're supposed to be under a regular performer's contract or an acting contract with the demarcation as a puppeteer, but not this." So that became an issue on occasion. So yeah, it's been a constant battle to maintain not the reputation, but the remuneration of the puppeteers over the years. They do try to cut it down whenever they can.
So does it happen from time to time that an actor gets asked to do what would be considered a puppeteer role without any training, or is there something that helps puppeteers go, no, you should be hiring me?
Well,
because I'm trained.
That is a very strong element, and that has been an issue again along the way. Oftentimes, property masters and property departments will be asked to do jobs on a show that categorize themselves and can be defined as puppeteering. And in that case, sometimes this union has gotten involved and said, well, no, this performance here is a puppeteering performance. It's not a job that a prop master should be assigned to. Although over the years, property departments have done many performances that could be considered puppeteering or special effects.
Yeah. And then costumes. I mean, is the wardrobe department in charge of getting your costume, or do they hire out like Jim Henson, like an entity production company of that, to provide the costumes?
For a
and the
specialty
setup?
suit like the Turtles or the Dinosaurs, you hire
Yeah.
a company that creates those things. Hensons created those suits.
Okay.
Other specialty shops do other performances. But yeah, Something like that is usually created by a specific entity for that.
That's good. So everybody gets business. It's just you specialize in something,
That's the hope.
So, any thoughts or wisdom or advice for somebody who might be considering going into puppeteering? Anything that you would recommend? Should they get training? Is there a place they could go?
Yeah, if anyone is interested in puppeteering, I would say, first of all, I know that Hensons has a program or programs that they have, used to be in years ago more regular, but they periodically, I think maybe a couple of times a year, you'd have to check with them. But they have training programs because they're always looking to find new talent for that purpose. Other than that, I know other friends of mine who puppeteer teach classes. So in pretty much any location, you can find a puppeteer in your area who is willing to help train you for a small fee, I'm sure. But I would say that if you want to pursue puppeteering, you need to do it. You need to learn the technique, and you need to practice the technique. So if you can find a teacher or a class, that would be a good idea, at least to start. And then beyond that, there's a lot of work at home. Get yourself in front of a mirror, or if you have a video camera, set up your video camera with a monitor, because that's another skill that you have to learn as a puppeteer, is how to perform with a monitor so that you know which direction you're moving and looking. There's all sorts of things that you can do in that regard at home and develop yourself quite nicely. And then the other side of the coin is develop your talents as a performer, as an actor, create characters, find voices, do all the silly, stupid stuff that you can do on your own and not be embarrassed. That will help you to do all of the wonderful stuff in front of a camera or in front of an audience.
Yeah. Now, what gears them to a suit type character? Like, I mean, because I could see the puppeteerings as more of a hand puppet, giving you the basics first.
Yeah.
But then how do you progress into like Ninja Turtle?
Well, I mean, for me, the progression from stage actor to doing suit work was just I was an actor, and that was the environment I was going to be in. I was still the same actor that I was on the stage, but wrapped up in a big rubber suit. Now you have to figure out, and this is another thing about suit work, each suit has its own special challenges, and you have to learn how to manipulate that suit and overcome those challenges so you can get your performance out.
And do they clean those suits every day? Because it must be pretty.
Yeah. If the
intense.
people you're working with are on top of it and good at their jobs, they do at least dry the suits. Cleaning is a much more involved thing, depending on the structure of the suit involved. But yeah, with Turtles, for example, when we were shooting the films, each of us hero turtles, the four of us, we had, I think, 12 or 14 suits each. And we would just tear them up because they were full latex. So when we're doing all the martial arts moves and stuff and the fight choreography, we would rip them and tear them because they are that flimsy material. But the main thing was, like I say, you sweat them up real bit good because it's being inside of a big rubber ball, and they have to dry them out. So they would have specific drying rooms that they would hang them in to dry, and then they have to do what they called scumbling, which was basically repairing the foam latex. They would put fresh latex in tears and stuff like that, and then paint them according to what they should look like, and that would be a fresh suit for the next filming.
So, any last thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I mean, I'm very pleased that you wanted to pursue finding out about this, because not everybody talks about that when they interview me. They like to talk about the process and turtles and stuff like that, but the actual training and such, that isn't often the topic. So I'm pleased with that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for being on the show. This was awesome.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram at Tammy Magaro. Until we meet again, what's your story?